I'm going to get started. Hello and welcome to the latest installment of the Business Because Presents webinar series. I'm Shannon Cook. I'm a senior writer for Business Because. If you don't know us already, we're a leading online publisher dedicated to news about business education and careers and anything in between. Thank you so much for joining us on the webinar, wherever you are in the world. I hope you're all doing well. But for this special workshop on how to identify your personal brand for your career, I'm going to be joined by faculty and alums from the Old Dominion University Strome College of Business MBA program. So they'll be here today to tell you everything you need to know about how to give yourself the best possible chance of career success through personal branding. Just to give you an idea of the format for the webinar, it's going to be 45 minutes. Susan's going to kick off with a short presentation which covers some key points about how to identify your personal brand for your MBA career. Then I'll be asking some questions of my own and finding out some top tips on how to stand out in the whole process. For the remainder of the session, it's going to be up to the audience. So we'll be hosting a live Q&A session. So you can ask any questions you might have about the Old Dominion University or ODU MBA, career tips, and anything else that you feel is relevant. If you do have questions, it'd be great if you could start asking them now. So at the bottom of your screen, you'll see a Q&A function. You can use this and vote questions up that you want to be answered. And it's always nice if you could include just a little bit of information about yourself, so where you're from and maybe your professional background. But yeah, please ask questions in the Q&A function because that's where I'm going to be looking. But first up, it would be amazing if I could welcome our panelists today. So it's great to have you all here. To begin, it would be great if you could provide a brief introduction to yourself and a little bit about your involvement with the ODU MBA before we hand it to Susan to give her presentation. So we're going in alphabetical order. Let's start with you, MJ.
All right, thanks for having me here. Yeah, my name's MJ Walters. I currently work here at Chewy, Chewy.com. If you're not familiar with the company, it's a e-commerce pet retail store. And I work in the SNOP department. I'm basically the manager for the core network. On that, my affiliation with ODU, I was a student at ODU and graduated there in 2021 in this summertime. I was also the president of the MBA Association and treasurer, I guess, for a short time also while I was did my time there. And then before that, I was actually in the Marine Corps for about 26 years, where I served on there and did a complete transition of careers from military service to civilian, in this case, supply chain world.
Thank you so much. And Shana, let's hear from you.
Hi, my name is Shauna Wood. I am the program manager, academic advisor for the MBA program at Old Dominion University Strome College of Business. I deal with all facets of our program from admissions the whole way through alumni. So I'm happy to be here with you all today and answer any questions that you might have post Susan's presentation.
Thank you so much. And Susan.
Hi, I'm Susan Kraft, and I'm one of the instructors for the MBA program for ODU. I own my own consulting company and have been in business in the HR field for over 30 years now. So this is something that we all enjoy working on. We originally come to this and we think one thing, and by the time you're done with your program, you realize that you've learned an awful lot, and things that you thought you knew, you find out they've definitely changed. So I look forward to talking to you all today and answering your questions and providing you a little bit more information.
Amazing. Thank you all for that. That's really interesting. So yeah, Susan, if you'd like to start sharing your screen and then we can kick off the deck.
Okay, great. Well, it's interesting because we said building your professional brand. And the way that this came about was our students were telling us that they didn't have quite the tools they needed when they graduated. And building your personal brand is a little bit different than just having a resume. We were looking to create a resume that's going to be usable, not just today, but also when you reach that director's point, that VP position or that CEO's position that you're looking for. So that being said, we listened to the students and we came up with some ideas and created this program, and it was created for them with their thought and sight. So as we go forward, the next thing I want y'all to do is I want you to take a moment and think, what does your name say about you? We all know what our name means, and we know why our family gave us the name that we have, or we know what name we go by. The interesting part, though, is if you actually Google your name, you're going to find just not information about yourself, but also other people with the exact same name. This could be located in where you live, or it could be somewhere else in the world. Why is it important? It's important because as you're looking for jobs, people do go and search out who's wanting to apply for whatever the job there is, and they want to know what's said about them. So it's always a good idea for you to realize what's being said about your name. Might not be you, but you want to be able to come back and say, yes, I did see that, but that is not me. And no, I've never experienced what it says I have here. Then we talk about master resume, and this is a little bit different than anything you've probably ever experienced before. Most of the time, we're told a resume should be only a page in length, and if it gets much more than that, that's way too much. But here in this course, what we do is we actually create a master resume, and it includes every job you've ever held and everything you've ever accomplished within that job. And if you noticed, I said the word accomplished, not task. Because what normally happens when we write a resume, we put in what we're required to do. But that's not what companies are after. Companies want to know what you've accomplished and all that you've done previously, because if you've accomplished it for somebody else, you can accomplish it for them. So a master resume is going to include information about you as a person, your professional summary. It's going to include key professional highlights. It's going to include all of your jobs, all the accomplishments that you did, along with the volunteer work, along with committees and boards that you've served on, certifications that you may have, all the education that you've ever experienced, and in addition to maybe all the presentations you've ever made. Maybe you've presented at a conference, or you're considered a subject matter expert in your field. So when people come into the class, they're thinking, oh, I've already got my resume done. It's easy. No worries. I don't have to work on it. But this is where we go a little bit different. When we create this resume for you, you're able to take this resume for whatever job that you're looking forward to, not just today, but also in the future. And that's what we want you to do. It's not just for today we're planning for. We want you to be able to achieve all that you want to achieve within your career. The next piece that we look at is we also looked at LinkedIn. And when you stop and you think about LinkedIn, it's like, oh, that's who's talking to who, and that's how I socially network, and that's how I found out about jobs. That's also how companies find out about you. And your personal brand follows you through LinkedIn. It follows you through your resume. It follows you through how you respond, let's say, to a virtual interview. You notice my background. Well, my background is the exact same background that you'll find on my business card. You'll also find it on my LinkedIn profile. Why? Because it's actually following me through, and it is part of who I am. So that's what you have to stop and think about. It's not just, oh, I need to put a picture up there. What is the picture saying about you? LinkedIn we use a lot because that's how companies find you. So you want to make sure the information you have out there is the appropriate information. But we also take into consideration what you did previously. As MJ said, he was in the military, right? Well, some people in the military aren't able to put out everything that they do. So how do I go about writing that resume or writing those key items that I need to include and not give away the information that I can't give away, but also say what I am capable of doing and what I've accomplished in the past? And that's exactly what we do. The last piece that we look at is your picture. So many of us think, oh, it's no big deal. I'll go take a selfie of myself. And what does that look like? So you always want to make sure that you have a professional picture. And we don't want a picture that's not of you. What I mean by that is we don't want you so dressed in a suit and tie if that's not who you are. We want you to come across as who you are. We're not here to change you. We're just here to help you take all of your assets that you have and be able to get that job that you're looking for, be able to get that degree that you're looking for, and be able to move forward in your life. And I'm going to send that back to you, Shannon, I'm sorry.
Right. Similar name, it's okay. Thank you so much for that. That was really, really great, and a nice little snippet and insight into the actual course that's offered in the ODU MBA. I just have a few questions that I just wanted to ask based on that. So how do MBA grads go about sort of integrating this professional brand, into things like the interview process? Obviously, that's a different kind of process. You're going to be facing somebody and you're going to be speaking about your various experiences. But yeah, how do they really integrate their professional brand into the interview process?
That professional brand shows up in everything. So it's going to show up in the resume that you've created. It's going to show up in your LinkedIn profile. It's going to show up in that conversation that you have with somebody. As I mentioned, a lot of times what we're doing now is we're doing virtual interviews, right? So you want to follow that brand through. You want to think about what you're doing and what's behind you. I interviewed for a position of a CEO, and the person did not stop and think about what was going on. But what we had done is we had sent them out, they replied on an app, and the person had just finished running. They were outside, they had the tracksuit on, and here they are recording their answers to questions that we had of them before we went any further. How did that come across? Not really very good, right? Or what if you are being asked to do this virtual interview and you happen to be at your current employer and your employer's name is behind you? There again, not exactly the brand that you want to put forth.
No, those are excellent points. And MJ, is somebody who's actually been part of this course as a student at ODU, as part of the MBA program. It'd be great to hear about what your sort of main takeaways from professional branding were from the course, and how you sort of use these to get your career.
Yeah, I mean, I was in Susan's class. I did that towards the front end of my my time at ODU, and what that helped me, and she kind of mentioned that the master resume, being 26 years in the Marine Corps, every 1 or 2 years I was in a new job, new billet description. I've done a lot in the Marine Corps in my 26 years, and so pulling all that out, and then the one thing that Susan really helped me with is trying to understand the military language into the business language to help me out. And so when it came down to interviewing and writing resumes to get that first interview, having that language correct, having to be the right business language, not military language, because what I found coming out here, most people don't understand what I'm talking about if I start using my jargon. Really, I think put me in front of some of my peers also who are also trying to find those similar jobs. And it really helped me though. For each different position, you're going to have different questions and different ways of answering that question. And it basically gave me that entire list of questions or answers to go back to ahead of time, because I had thought through them, just reviewing it before I walked into the interview process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's really interesting and great to hear from somebody who's actually done the program. And Susan, what would you say to people who maybe don't really know what exactly makes them unique? And how can they go about finding these qualities to form part of the professional brand?
Interesting enough, I have a lot of students that come in and they're at that point of, I don't know what you want me to say. This is what I've done. This is who I am. But because this is a one-on-one, so yes, we do meet in person, but I also meet one-on-one with all of the students. And it's not just one time, it's numerous times throughout the whole semester. And I will ask questions. I'll be like, well, you've got this written down here. What does that really mean? Or what was the most important thing you think you've ever done in your career? By the time that we're done, people realize that things that they do every day and things that they think is the norm isn't really the norm. And they're like, oh yeah, I really did do great with this. I had one of my students respond to me from last semester that said he's always been able to apply for jobs, but he actually used the resume that he just created with myself. And he said it was the fastest turnaround he's ever had of anybody asking to talk with him in more detail. And this is what I hear over and over again. So yes, you'd be surprised what people find out about themselves by the time they're done with it.
And you spoke earlier a little bit in your presentation about sort of how a personal brand can maybe sometimes be poorly constructed if it's not thought through properly. But could you speak more about that and how to avoid that?
Well, really, when you stop and think about, we also have athletes that take the course, right? So they're in the MBA, and all they've ever done is been a professional athlete. And they're like, I've never worked. How do I create a brand that's going to show an employer what I'm capable of doing? And that's when I sit back and I say, okay, how many hours a week are you in the gym? What type of leadership skills are you having with your team? What are you responsible for? And as we talk through this, people realize I might not have a professional job that got paid to do this, but yeah, I actually have done things throughout my career that I can be proud of, and that will demonstrate what I'm capable of doing for another employer.
No, that's really, really interesting. And MJ, I'm sure a lot of people are going to be really interested in the fact that you've gone from a military career to a business background. But what were your initial sort of motivations or reasons for choosing, particularly the Old Dominion University MBA? And do you feel that your choice of business school has sort of shaped your professional brand?
What led me to choose ODU, and I obviously looked at multiple universities. I actually live in Arizona now, and I knew at that time that I was going to come back to Arizona. So I looked at, University of Arizona, ASU over here also for their programs. They obviously both have two strong programs. But understanding my background, I'm a little bit older than most of the students. I was one of the older students coming out of 26 years in the Marine Corps. I really wanted to have the opportunity to be in a classroom situation and be able to sit with the professor, ask the questions, but also work with my fellow students, because academics, it had been over 2 decades since I actually went to a university, not including military universities. So ODU is literally 4 or 5 miles. So there was a convenience factor. It was like 4 or 5 miles from my work, which was a big player on it. But it was also the versatility of the program, because I was still in the military. We're still deploying forces overseas. I was still a potential candidate to be sent over. In fact, I was asked once and I turned it down because I was literally trying to finish my schooling and get out of the Marine Corps. But it was the versatility of, if I do get deployed, can I continue my program depending upon where that deployment was, or continue it when I came back? And the versatility of the program is really what led to me sticking with this ODU. And the fact also, I literally had a chance to go in and meet Shanna personally, which is, the personal one-on-one is always helpful.
Great, thank you. And so I think we're going to move on to the audience Q&A, because I'm getting a few questions coming in and want to make sure that we cover them all in the short time we have. But before I move on, Shana, I think it would be really beneficial for everyone to just hear a little bit about what you think makes the program unique, and what people who may not be familiar with the program should know about it before we go into some of the questions.
Well, fortunately, MJ touched on one of the key factors. Our curriculum is the same for all students, whether they are on campus, online, full-time, or part-time. And the curriculum is such that we have students who definitely can be fluid in all of those situations. So, which is pretty unique. Many programs are, if you're an online student, you're just online. That's where you have to stay. Or if you're an on-campus student, that's where you have to stay. Or if you're part-time, that's where you have to stay. But our program allows a fluidity that is pretty special. And it's the same degree, no matter what. It doesn't matter if you are online. Your diploma doesn't say online MBA. It's an MBA. And so it's all the same material, regardless of delivery mode or speed to completion. And certainly we have students who can complete this degree on a full-time basis in as little as 4 semesters. So it can be done pretty fast. I also have some students, like some medical doctors, who they are obviously not going to be able to stop their practice and come back to school. So they may be taking just 1 course a semester, and they can take upwards of 8 years if they want. But in general, most students are done within 2, even on a part-time basis. The other thing is why all of you folks are here. One thing that our program does that is unique is we do this personal branding class. And it's a short class compared to most traditional courses, but it is one that has become a seminal point for a number of people, where they may have come into the MBA with certain thoughts as to what they might do when they grow up, and they go through the course, have the opportunity to rethink their goals, because that's one of the primary things that they do first in the course, is rethink their goals, and then go from there with regard to building out the rest of their plan. And sometimes in that soul searching, they come up with something else. The other thing is we have a number of unique opportunities, number of concentration opportunities, but also not only within the College of Business, but across the university, upwards of 50 different ways to specialize. So if individuals are interested in project management, we have the opportunity for that. If somebody is more interested in public procurement, we have that opportunity as well, and a whole lot in between. Our particular region, we're right along the coast. So anybody looking to come to campus, you have a beach very close by, and we get all 4 seasons, but yeah, we get a pretty robust summer that you can enjoy the beach. But because of being by the coast, we also recognize that there's coastal resiliency, and our university actually specializes in some of that area as well. So if anybody is really interested in what's going on with that type of work, this is a great place to be. Those are just some of many things that make us an ODU a special place to be.
Great, perfect. Thank you. I think that's a really great overview before we go into audience questions. So yeah, thank you everybody for sending them in. I'm just going to try to get through as many as I can because we've got so many to get through. I've already been sent some questions before as well, so just going to go through some of those ones. Susan, I've got a question for you, which I thought was really interesting. Somebody's asked, how important would you say networking is to personal branding?
Well, I myself say both are as important. You have to network just as much as you have to have a personal brand. My recommendation is, where do you want to work? And you figure out where you want to work, and then you find somebody in that department that you want to work in and contact them and ask them if they will be a mentor to you. That's a wonderful way of going about starting the conversation. Also, what does your professional associations have? There are times though, but what we found out is people have gotten their degree or the profession is in one field and they're looking really to change it into something else. And sometimes that's where the MBA helps. So it's kind of like, don't assume that you can get by with one mentor. Look at where you are lacking in knowledge, and then find people who are actually great in those areas and ask them if they'll be a mentor for you. But at the same time, you be a mentor for somebody else. You'd be surprised what you end up learning and what the network will work and how you jobs kind of go about. And the next thing you know, you've been offered a job that you weren't really expecting, but it's all through the networking that you've done.
And that sort of segues into another question I got that I'd like to ask to you, MJ. What kind of sort of networking experiences did you gain on the program, and how are these helpful for you?
Actually, I wanted to jump on the back end of Susan that kind of asked and answered the question there. So networking, for me, the primary networking network I use was the veterans. We have a huge network on LinkedIn and other places to connect with companies. And I made connections with lots of companies out there and just talking to them once in a while. How I got my job in Chewy was through a military fellowship program. It helped us out, to transition from the military to the civilian sector. And it was a network that actually provided the opportunity. He happened to be the recruiter for the military recruiter at Chewy, and called me. He said, MJ, I see you on the list, but you didn't apply for Chewy. And I said, oh, I didn't know Chewy was open. He pulled me into it. I did my fellowship. I built my network within Chewy at Veterans too, and started talking to them, because although my fellowship was in operations, I didn't want to stick into operations. I wanted to move into the supply chain world. And so I started talking to guys in actual FC launch who are veterans in quality and supply chain. And a couple of the guys who have been a little more seasoned sat me down one day, went through my resume, looked at everything, said, MJ, we think you're best for this this job in transportation. Looking at everything you've done, I did a lot of stuff overseas, moving things and shipping things. we think you're good in this job. I want you to talk to this guy. He's a senior director. So just set up a one-on-one with the senior director. And he was very honest. He said, MJ, you're not qualified for this job. I can't hire you for this, but I got this other job called SNOP. I'm like, oh, sounds great. I had no idea what SNOP was. I went back and I found it in one of my textbooks, but I found it. In that, be honest, that is how I got my job, is through the network and the military community, who finally got me in touch with the director, who told his people, no, we want this guy. He doesn't have the skills yet, because I didn't understand big data, how to use SQL and all that kind of stuff yet, but he has all the soft skills we want, and we can develop them.
Amazing. That's a really, really great, interesting story. And Susan, I just had a really interesting question come in here. Somebody said that they're from Hampton, and they said there's so many different pathways to positions like COO, Chief of Staff. How do you recommend someone whose career is still developing to keep their personal branding open to different pathways without appearing unfocused?
I would say probably the best advice I've ever had, and he's a gentleman I bring in sometimes to talk to the different MBA groups. And he had worked for this company for 42 years. And when they were looking for their new CEO, what they looked for was somebody that had worked in every department. Never been a CEO before, but they had literally worked in every department in a company, from IT to manufacturing, operations, the whole 9 yards. And did it look bad on the resume that that person had done that? The answer was no, because what they were able to do is come in and talk about what they have experienced and how what they learned helped them focus on how they could help the new company grow. So it doesn't look bad.
I'm going to chime in on that a little bit too. Not only to piggyback on Susan, there are a number of leadership development programs that companies offer that specifically do that, try to move employees around so that they cross-pollinate into different specialties, but ultimately so that they can be brought up through the ranks to get into the C-suite. So you may actually, depending where you are in your career, really even benefit from something like that. I know locally our Anthem organization has that. GE, if you're looking more internationally, and a whole lot of companies in between. I just know those are some of the organizations that have hired some of our students. So I like to kind of toss that out there, that maybe you would really benefit from a leadership development program.
Great, thank you. And Shana, just keeping with you here, because I've had quite a few questions related to scholarship and funding options, and I know you have some great initiatives at ODU, but yeah, could you talk to us a little bit about what kind of scholarship or financial aid options there are?
Yeah, well, first of all, our particular degree in the landscape of MBA programs without scholarship is fairly affordable. For our international or out-of-state or full-time students, we actually offer graduate assistantships, and they come with a stipend that also bring the tuition down to in-state rates, which is less than $600 a credit hour. For an AACSB accredited program, it's a pretty good deal. For everybody, we actually have some scholarship opportunities, some that are need-based. And actually, I'm getting to that time of year right now where I kind of put out a call to our current student population and just say, hey, you know, FAFSA doesn't always indicate what's going on with you. Let us know if you have a particular need. Send me a brief memo and we'll put it in the mix and try to share what we have available for this particular need-based scholarships. We actually have 2 particular need-based scholarships. We also actually have a scholarship that is open to just part-time students. And I also have another scholarship that's available to full-time students who attain some really high GPA and test scores. So if you're very competitive that way, you may have a very generous scholarship available to you as well. And otherwise, most of our employees or students are supported by their employers. Over 75% of our students are receiving some kind of support from their employers because 90-ish% of our students are working full-time, which is nice for our full-time students because they automatically sometimes get linkages to be able to get jobs right with their classmates. But those are some of the primary ways that students find ways to be able to pay for their school. I've had a couple of students also report that they've had some luck utilizing the Scholly app and some other third-party resources as well. And certainly if you have planned your time, you may be able to look at professional associations like Susan alluded to earlier, that they're great for networking, but they're also potentially great for scholarship opportunities, as well as just, looking actually via Google, what are you interested in? And you'd be surprised what kind of comes up as scholarship opportunities. That's a whole nother conversation. We'd have to do a whole nother webinar, Shannon, but that's just the tip of the iceberg.
Great, thank you. Yeah, there were quite a few questions on that, so I think that was a really, really great comprehensive answer. MJ, I thought there were quite a few questions about the sort of your favorite courses or your main highlights from the MBA that you did. What other sort of courses did you do, or yeah, what were your main highlights that you think have really helped you in your career now?
The ones that helped me most in my career now, with where I'm currently on track within the SNLP, would probably be the operations management course, and then the analytics and basically the analytics course. That's a lot of my work. Again, my job is to basically the coordinator between operations and supply chain. I make sure I set the targets for each of our fulfillment centers, how much they need to ship and how much they need to receive, and the balance of inventory within those buildings. So those types of classes that I had was actually Dr. Cook, who is the professor there. Didn't realize it back then how important they would have been, but now they're the ones that every once in a while I do pull up the books and I kind of look back and see what I studied back then. Same thing with analytics. It's an e-commerce company, big data. You got lots of data points. We're shipping about anywhere around 7 million units a week. And so everything we do is lots of data. And so pulling that, understanding how to read it and how to analyze it and make it into a usable product at the back end has probably been the most important. Some of the other ones, though, I enjoyed. I really enjoyed the finance classes. I'm not a big math person. Sean, I can attest to that from my beginning math scores before coming into the class or the course. But I enjoyed the professors, but I enjoyed just learning about it. And obviously, as I just sat through the earnings call yesterday with my company and listened in on it, and being able to understand what's going on in the company and the big picture across over time and so forth.
Right, I think that's really great to hear for our audience right now, who some of them might be coming from a non-business background or maybe even the military. So I think it's really good to hear that you don't need to be this perfect in every way. There's so many learning opportunities you can have through business school. And Susan, I've just got a question here about what do you do when you have a good level of education, but not a great amount of practical or hands-on experience for a particular job opening?
Volunteer. That's the best thing I can tell you. If you don't have a whole lot of business experience, find a volunteer organization and you can learn a lot of the skills that way. And we have people that have volunteered throughout their life and they're like, but that doesn't count for anything. Actually, you can. I know of somebody that she was lacking a certain piece that she needed for the job, and it dealt with budgeting. And she was a member of a professional association. She'd been responsible for a piece of that. And the budget that she worked with was about $500,000. And she was able to pull in what she had done as a volunteer to fill in those gaps of what she did not have in her real job. So that's one way of going about doing it.
I'm going to toss one other little tidbit out there. A number of colleges, it's not just at MBA programs, but colleges are starting to do things called micro internships that you may have been hearing as well. These are really good opportunities for individuals even earn a little extra money. Many of them are paid, but they tend to be project-based. So you can get a flavor of something. You do tend to need to have a little bit of experience in that area, but it's an opportunity to grow that experience a little bit further. So in addition to volunteering, maybe micro internshiping, it works even for people who are working full-time. So.
And MJ, it'd be interesting to hear, were you involved in any sort of experiential or practical learning opportunities during the MBA that sort of helped you to get a bit of business experience while you were studying?
During the MBA, not directly. I mean, I was still serving in the Marine Corps during that time frame, and so I had those responsibilities. And academics basically took all my free time. I was up all night, like everyone who does an MBA program. You got to study. But what I did take advantage of afterwards was, again, I mentioned it earlier, it's a program that helps military people transition over to the civilian sector. I went through Chewy, but a lot of the companies do it. There's a huge support out there to try to recruit military and back into the civilian sectors. And that's basically, I think if I recall, it's a 12 or 13 week fellowship is what they call it. So I did that with Chewy. I worked basically as an area manager out here at Phoenix site and on the inbound side. And they taught me how to be an inbound manager for operations. So it gave me a good understanding of just not that, but I obviously floated over to the other parts to see what else is going on in the buildings. So I built my understanding of how the entire facility is working, which again helped me get to the position I'm on. I mean, even right now, I'm in the process of hiring another person in this position. I'm looking for somebody who has a similar background where they've done a little bit of time in the operations. And if they're not, we're going to send them over there for a month and go work for a month as an operator before they come into the position.
Perfect, thank you. And just trying to get through a few more of the questions because I've got quite a few more and we don't have that much time. But Shana, somebody is asking here what kind of application requirements are needed in terms of tests. So somebody's asking specifically about the GMAT. Is that something that's required? And
officially, the GMAT or the GRE is a required element. We do offer some waivers in particular circumstances, and certainly we have all of that posted publicly, but generally it surrounds opportunities, whether there was a previous terminal degree or particular types of work experience, and this type of thing. And of course, having at least a minimum GPA where some academics was definitely proven in the past is usually some factors as to whether or not a GMAT waiver or GRE waiver would be awarded.
Thank you. And I've got some questions that are based around people not really knowing how to decide when a program is the right fit. So how should someone think about it, whether the ODU MBA is right for them? Maybe I'll hear from MJ about how he decided that. Yeah, so
having been doing this type of work for more than a decade, we'll just leave it at that. People come at this a couple of different ways, but predominantly, I encourage students to look for AACSB accreditation. It's the highest accreditation that a college of business can attain. So that would be my first. And once you get to those 700 schools, then you can go, well, from this point, do I plan to attend full-time? Do I plan to attend part-time? Do I plan to maybe even live in a particular area or have hopes of staying in a particular area? And these are things that matter. Similar to what MJ spoke about earlier with regard to flexibility, do I know that there's a certain fluidity in my life that I'm going to need a program that can accommodate that? Because at the master's level, it's not like undergrad where you can transfer courses back and forth very easily. In fact, most MBA programs are not very flexible about it at all. So once you start with a program, you're really going to want to finish with that program as well. So these are some of the things that you need to think about. as well as, do I want any online? Do I want all online? Do I want any on campus? Do I want all on campus? And, what about my peers? What, are there going to be people, like I mentioned earlier, I have a number of full-time students that really benefit from the full-time employees that they're in class with. So these are all different factors that, you just need to do some introspection first. I would challenge that outside of going to, say, Harvard, that once you start getting, farther down the line, you really start to go, MBA programs have a lot of similarities and employers want to see the degree. So just make sure you're really learning the material that you need to learn to become a solid decision maker. That's going to be the larger challenge in this equation, is making sure that you come away with the skill sets that you need to be able to get to where you're going. I would question, some people apply to MBA and they probably should be looking at a completely different degree entirely. That maybe they should look at a supply chain degree if they know that's all they are ever going to want to do. Or I certainly have had some teachers come in and say, well, I need an MBA, but they really need an educational leadership degree. So these are some things to consider. And I know it seems crazy to be hearing this from somebody who wants all the people who are interested in MBA to apply to her program. But I also am fully transparent. And that's maybe another thing to consider, is when you are looking at a degree, do you feel that the people that you're working with are really being honest with you and resonating with you?
Perfect, thank you. And were these the sort of things, MJ, I know you spoke earlier about your reasons for choosing ODU MBA, but what sort of made you feel like this was a good fit for you?
Again, I think the primary factor for me was knowing myself. I was never comfortable going into an online program. To me, it was more important to be on campus, learning from the professors, having that one-on-one discussion with them. Having those, I mentioned the analytics courses and stuff in the those types of really high mathematical courses at the beginning of the program, which are really tough. We kind of weed people out sometimes in those because they're challenging courses. And we met every week. We had a weekend meeting and we all sat down. We figured out how to get through these problems together, and we taught each other. And that helps, that's how I learned. Now I had the opportunity, thanks to COVID, to go online too, as I was in the middle of the course when COVID hit. So what I did find is online, I was able to get everything done. The professors were very available. I had no issues with with getting the help when I needed it. And then by then I had a lot of points of contact, obviously, with fellow students. So we still, met virtually and so forth to work through problem solving and help each other out. So to me, that was really the biggest factor.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. And just as we're coming towards the end of the webinar, I've just got a question here for you, Susan, that I think really sort of rounds up everything and seems like a nice way to end. Somebody's just asked, how do you think an MBA contributes to a professional brand in a positive way?
So it really depends on what you want to do with your career, like Shauna said, right? Let's take an example. Let's take HR. And you know that you would like to be in the C-suite. The MBA is going to give you the business piece. It doesn't just give you the HR piece. So when we talk about business, we're talking about financial, we're talking about analytical. Can you do a critical evaluation? How do you write a business case? It's looking at the entire organization and understanding how it works. In the HR world, you need to understand about people and how people will help the organization move forward. But we also have professional certifications for that. So by getting the MBA, you're getting the business piece that's rounding you out. And by getting the professional certification, it's letting everybody know that you know the knowledge that you need to have for your profession.
Perfect, thank you. And I think that's a fantastic way to wrap up. So yeah, thank you everyone for your time. Thank you so much to our wonderful panelists, Susan, MJ, and Shauna. Shauna, if students have any more questions, because unfortunately we weren't able to get through because there were so many, where could they go?
Actually, a real quick an easy email address is mbainfo@odu.edu, and that will come to myself and actually other folks on my staff. And of course, we're at odu.edu/MBA. So we try to make it super simple.
Perfect. That's great. Thank you. And yeah, thank you everyone for our wonderful panelists for staying engaged and asking so many questions. You'll be sent a recording of this webinar to look back on, so if there's anything you missed or didn't quite catch, then just have a look out for that in your email inboxes. That will be included with more information about ODU. Do check out our website, businessbookers.com. You can read more about ODU's programs. We've recently published some articles and other business school news and get practical resources to help your application. I'm just going to be launching a poll, but if you could just have a quick, it will come up on your screen. If you could just respond to that quickly, it won't take up too much of your time, just so we can learn about your experience on the webinar. But thank you again to our wonderful panelists, and thank you to our audience. Bye now.